Hi, Appsec engineers. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the new vulnerability that's affected GitLab. Now, this vulnerability is pretty serious and it especially affects people who are running self-hosted version of GitLab, which is most of the users of GitLab. So without further ado, let's get started and let's get started now. Now, I'm going to be talking to you about the vulnerability that affects GitLab specifically from the perspective of what happened and what seems to have happened. There is not much information that is being released. There was a HackerOne report, but that HackerOne report has since then been made private. I think GitLab also had a bunch of external links out there that has also been made private from that point on, which means that we don't have too much publicly available code information. Although there are a lot of exploits and there seem to be a lot of scanning tools that have already been released on GitHub to be able to identify this vulnerability and to be able to exploit this vulnerability. Now, let's initially talk about vulnerability itself. This vulnerability is CVE 2023-7028. So this seems to have been identified while it's been released in Jan 11th of 2024. It's been given CVE 2023. Probably the CVE was released then, and as a result of which it was given a CVE in 2023. Now, obviously, it's been given a CVE in 2023 simply because it's probably released or the vulnerability has been identified then. So the issue really is GitLab, I think, which is the community edition, the enterprise edition, affecting all versions from 16.1 prior to 16.16, 16.2 prior to 16.2.9, 16.3. They seem to have multiple releases in GitLab. I'm a GitLab user, but I'm a GitLab cloud user. So I'm not sure whether I'm really exposed to much of this, but it seems to be that all of these versions. So you should definitely check out whether you are affected by this. Now, most of these links that are in the NVD CVE database list are not working. They don't work. These links are by and large 404. So the HackerOne bug bounty report is a 404. Same with the HackerOne report, which is also a 404. And I've signed in, and even after I've signed in, there is nothing. It's been changed to private. The GitLab issues also have been 404. So clearly they made this private because the nature of the seriousness of the issue is what I can imagine it being. I'm not sure about whether or not. So you can see that all the links provided in the CVE NVD database are 404s. Now, let's talk about what the issue actually is and what I've understood by it. There are some other information. Now, GitLab has this particular page. I'm going to put it down in the notes. You can check this out when you want to. Now, the community edition and the enterprise edition are both affected. So if you're using GitLab, even for free community edition, if you're using it, you are still vulnerable to this. Now, they have a whole bunch of security issues that have been identified, but the biggest one essentially being this, right? Account takeover, password reset without user interaction. This is the one, this is the big one that they have identified as the vulnerability here. Now, let's talk a little bit about what this is. Now, this is the one that's causing all the stir. This is the one causing all the problems. So as far as I understand, what I've seen from GitHub posts and other places which are not directly this, what I have seen is that if somebody requests a password reset on GitLab, on any of these affected products, which could be GitLab C, GitLab E, all of these specific versions, if somebody requests a password reset and gives an array of emails or multiple emails in that input, then the password reset goes to both, or probably even more than that. So it goes to both those emails. This is a huge problem because now somebody can just reset your account and add their email as the secondary, and the password reset link goes to both. This is pretty crazy simply because they're not verifying who the email is going to, point number one. The bigger issue probably is there is a pretty big input validation error that's had happened here. So that's a pretty big problem that you'll see that it affects. In fact, if you look at this particular hub repo that I found, somebody seems to have created a Python script, and they have mentioned the same. The vulnerability lies in management of the emails, resetting passwords. The attacker can provide two emails and reset code is sent to both. This is a pretty big problem. So what GitLab has recommended, and this seems to be the bulk of the issue, you'll have to update it. You'll have to have two-factor auth. This is something I tell everybody to do. Obviously, you're handling source code. And whenever you're handling source code, you need to have two-factor auth. It's pretty basic stuff by now, but a lot of people still don't do it. So this has been fixed apparently with the security release. And if you are looking for indicators of compromise, they are asking you to look into these logs, which is basically the GitLab production JSON logs. And they're looking for anything with HTTP requests to user password path with a JSON array of multiple emails. So clearly, what can happen is instead of you sending one email in that password reset link, you're essentially sending an array of emails and it's processing it. So that is what is happening with this particular flaw. They've also asked you to check out the audit log.json, audit json.log. Yet audit json.log, meta caller ID with this particular function, which is in Ruby on Rails. The target details have, again, JSON array with multiple emails. The vulnerability seems to have been introduced in May 2023. So it's gone undetected for seems like a pretty long time, which is pretty interesting because it is a community edition product. There are open source community editions of the product out there. They have linked to their additional things. They have a root cause analysis process, very nicely documented root cause analysis process. By the way, I would recommend any defenders to take a read. It's pretty nice. And of course, they also have password authentication options. So they're saying that if you're using SSO, disable password authentication options, which is a good thing to do. If you're using SSO, you don't want to have multiple places in which user can log in from, or in this case, get a reset link to. Two-factor authentication, yes, you'll not be able to take over your account. So two-factor to the rescue, I would definitely recommend you do this. I have 2FA on all my source repository, source control systems, if you will. So that is something that you will see. I'm just basically talking about this vulnerability. I'm not getting into the Slack Mattermost and the other stuff right now. They seem to have covered all this as part of this particular fix. But the big one is this, which is basically being able to do an account takeover through a password reset by just sending a bunch of emails, and all of those emails seem to be receiving that particular password reset email. Now, let's talk about why this could have happened. Now, obviously, I read on Twitter, I don't remember the name of the person on Twitter that mentioned this, but the one person essentially mentioned that, hey, this is the problem with dynamically typed languages, simply because you have a dynamically typed language, which does not do a check. Ruby is a dynamically typed language. Ruby on Rails also obviously extends from Ruby. It's a dynamically typed language, dynamically typed system. As a result, there is no type check enforced for this sort of input. Yes, it's possible. That is possible. That's entirely likely. That might have happened. It could also be that they've not done validation, and validation could be just type check. Validation could also be in the form of other things. Validation seems to have been missed here, and this bug seems to have gone through regardless. So, and this is a classic example of a password reset bug, right? It's a pretty interesting password reset bug. Usually you have password reset bugs where it sends emails to the wrong email without verification and things like that. In this case, I'm not sure whether you need to have the right email and then you can have another email along with it. I'm not sure about that, but either way, this seems to be a pretty serious issue. So it largely stems from validation or non-validation of input, as the case may be. And it clearly comes down to the fact that this can be fixed through validation of input, type checking, additionally validating whether it's actually one single email, whether that email belongs to the user who's trying to reset the password and not somebody else, and not sending it to some other random person. I think the fix hopefully is a lot simpler for them, and they've obviously rolled it out. So I hope they don't have any repeats of those issues. But this, I think, is what happened. But for those of you out there, you should definitely be upgrading your GitLab ASP, obviously, because your GitLab now, anyone can reset. That's a problem. And if you're running self-managed GitLab, self-hosted GitLab, you need to immediately do something about this ASAP. So this is something, please read these notes that they've provided and take immediate action now. So this is something that you should keep in mind. With that, I come to the end of my video. Thank you so much. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.